Hi, I'm Nina Prater with NCAT. I'm a Sustainable Agriculture Specialist, and I'm here on my family's farm today to talk to you about how to take a good soil sample for soil testing. So I'm going to demonstrate how to take an individual soil sample and how to make sure when you're sampling your field you're getting a good representative sample. I'm going to talk about some of the tools we're going to use. So we'll start there. This is the best tool to use for soil sampling. It is a soil probe, and you can typically borrow these from your extension service office. And it takes a round cylindrical core of soil, and you can go the soil sampling depth that you need to go with this pretty easily. So this is really the ideal soil sampling tool. But if you don't have access to one of those, you can just use a shovel, like a sharpshooter like this. It's a little trickier, so I'll show you how to make sure you get a good soil sample with a shovel in a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to explain a little bit about how I decide how to subdivide a field for soil sampling. We're standing in about a 10-acre pasture that's under rotational grazing management. So the whole 10 acres is managed pretty similarly. So I wouldn't divide it up based on how I manage this pasture in particular. Sometimes that's a consideration. If you have a hay field versus a field that's grazed, you would want those sampled separately. But in this case, it's managed basically all the same. There's a perimeter fence around the whole thing, and then it gets subdivided as needed with electric fence for grazing. But the way I decide to subdivide this field is basically based on characteristics. The northernmost part, 5 acres, has a different slope and aspect than the piece I'm standing on right now. And so the soils are quite different, and there's a wet, low-lying area in the middle. So that's another consideration. You really want to make sure that the areas that you're sampling are fairly uniform so that you can take samples that will represent the whole area, because your soil test results are only as good as your soil sample, and you really want to get a soil sample that represents the majority of the field or the area that you're in. So that's how I've decided to subdivide this field, is do the north 5 acres separately and then the south 5 acres separately. And sometimes I'll even leave out an area. I won't sample from an area that's significantly different, like the low-lying wet area, just because it will need to be managed so differently. So what I'm going to do today is show you how to take an individual soil sample, and then I'm going to zigzag across the field because you want your soil sample to be fairly random. It's not truly random because you are going to make decisions. For example, if there were a cow pie right here, I wouldn't sample right next to it because that's going to give me an elevated nutrient level than is in most of the field. So it's not truly random, but you do want to zigzag across the field and get a pretty representative sample. And once you've done that, you're going to end up with a bucket full of soil, and you're going to want to mix it up really well and then let it air dry for a couple days, and then put it in either a Ziploc bag or a box with the extension service or whatever lab you're using for your soil analysis. Put it in there and send it off. But that soil sample has to represent, however big an area it is that you've sampled. So a little cup of soil is going to represent 5 to 10 acres to 15 acres. So you want to make sure that sample that you send in is as good and as representative as possible, because it'll give you the best fertilizer and lime recommendations, management recommendations as possible. So that's how you do that. And now I'm going to show you how to take an individual soil sample. So to take a soil sample using a soil probe, you just, with your heel or whatever, you can clear away the organic matter from the surface and press the probe in and then step it in And in Arkansas, they recommend a 4-inch sampling depth. In other states, it could be 6 inches. Just check with the lab that you're doing your soil testing with. And you step it in. Oh, I think I hit a rock, but that's okay. And then you just pull it out. So I only managed to get about 1.5 inches deep, but you really want to get a uniform depth of every soil sample to 4 inches in our case. And you just push it out and dump your sample into the bucket that you're using. Make sure it's a clean plastic bucket so that it doesn't contaminate your sample. And that's how you get a sample using a soil probe. Now, using a sharpshooter is a little bit different because it doesn't take a perfect cylinder. You run the risk of getting a wedge shape, and you really want to have a uniform thickness of your sample because nutrients concentrate on the surface layer of the soil, and so it could show a falsely high reading of soil nutrients if you don't get a good wedge shape. So you go straight down, maybe. Maybe not. Let's try another spot. Use this one. All right. So I went down as far as I could go. I'm going to pull the soil mass up. In this case, you're really going to want to remove the organic matter. And you need to get a vertically representative sample. So you get the same amount of soil from the bottom as from the top of your sample. So you can either use a knife. I'm very roughly pulling this away to get, it's very crumbly, it's hard to do, but that handful will do. And you want to pull out rocks and any organic, plant matter from your sample. So that's how you get a representative sample using a sharpshooter. It's not as easy as a soil probe, so that's why I recommend that, but it'll work in a pinch.